the second album from Australians Night Legion, who return after an interesting debut in 2017. Fight or Fall is a work that draws on that enthusiasm for power metal that recalls their creative peak in popularity. Too bad that it comes 20 years too late in that period. Be that as it may, fans of this style will enjoy this comeback, even if it doesn't exactly have any moments that we feel are absolutely memorable, despite being, we repeat, a solid power metal album.
We already knew that with that Catafalque we should expect the unexpected, but I honestly didn't expect an album like Alfold. When the problem, and we should understand problem as being said in inverted commas, was that we had different approaches that gave their work too heterogeneous an approach. Now we have the absolute opposite, i.e. a one-dimensional black and death metal album. The funny thing is that when there was such a heterogeneous approach, the albums always had a higher average quality, so this work, even though it disappoints those who were expecting something along the same lines, isn't bad. Quite the opposite. With a far-fetched comparison, it's the equivalent of Dream Theater's train of thought taken to an extreme, where the apparent one-dimensionality doesn't hide the appetite for striking melodies and some complexity in the compositions, even if this isn't at all evident. It really isn't. Alfold may disappoint then, but it soon gives us indications that even though it's unexpectedly different, as the title track and Foliander show so well, it's predictably good.
After last year's release of Nectar, Silent Skies, the project that brings together Tom S. England and Vikram Shankar now presents their third album, Dormant. We already know what to expect from this union, melancholic and introspective atmospheres that have a lot of their main bands, Evergrey and Redemption, but which bring a depth that is always impressive. Although it's not music we can turn to in order to satisfy our cravings for heaviness, their melancholy and mastery of letting the melodies breathe is unavoidable. Something that is very noticeable in the covers of some classics, starting with Iron Maiden's The Trooper, Bruce Dickinson's Dancing in the Dark, and Linkin Park's Numb. Perhaps the most predictable of the three, but which nevertheless fits in perfectly with the spirit of the album. Dormant is an album that speaks to our spirit in a way that few others do.
Finland's Valravn came to us as a mysterious band. We didn't know about their 2020 debut, Prey, but the fact that they play black metal and are from Finland immediately gave us some expectations that we wanted to put to the test. The Awakening ended up surpassing them and at the same time surprising us, since black metal ends up being reductive in relation to what they do, although we believe it's the best way to define their sound. Instead of having a proposal that bets on one-dimensionality, The Awakening is a surprisingly diverse and dynamic work that gradually grabs the listener. I confess that at first there may not be much room for surprise, but it's as we immerse ourselves in this work and its nuances that we are impressed by how it manages to be so effective and transcend what we expect from Scandinavian black metal from a musical point of view. An addictive surprise.
I confess I was afraid, very afraid, of this Virgin Steele album. The rate of decline in the quality of the band, led by David Defius, has been frightening, and the only link to the brilliance of yesteryear is his voice, which despite some exaggerations has remained above average. The problem is really the lack of power in his music, as well as the notion that much of it was made by Defius in his home studio, lacking the organic punch that a really bad, heavy metal album needs, to the point of being embarrassing. And the first listens of this new album don't put our minds at rest, but there is a step in the right direction. We still have the megalomaniacal side of the frontman with songs that are too long for their own good, on an album that is almost 80 minutes long, and we still have a lack of guitar. A lack of riffs when all we have for most of the time is a bass and drums that seem programmed and an inspired piano that is omnipresent. The guitar, when it appears, has a good impact, but unfortunately this is mainly in the solos. For those who got to know the band on Invictus, this reality can be painful. However, having gotten past this, and having listened to the band's last 5 original albums, it's still an improvement. Now we just have to add guitars, because this double pedal thing with bass and fretless doesn't work.
Sevendust are one of the most interesting bands to have been associated with the nu metal movement. perhaps because it's unattractive to call them alternative metal, and for reasons of promotion. Truth Killer is their 14th album and testament to a career that has managed to survive all the passing fads and always maintain the quality of their music. Heavy and emotional, here we have a set of songs that go beyond the commonplace, and where the added value is the way John Witherspoon brings soul to each of them. It's one of those albums that you can easily get lost in, and that grows with each listen.
It's been a long wait for a new album from the brave Nordic warriors Skálmöld, which has only made expectations grow naturally. And we can say that despite having to deal with those same expectations, after letting the dust settle, we are very satisfied with this ambitious work. Not only does it maintain the tradition of more aggressive folk metal, but it also maintains the tradition beyond aesthetic values, being an album inspired by Icelandic and Nordic legends. It may be an album that requires effort on the part of the listener who expects something immediately catchy, but the truth is that Skálmöld have never been interested in doing something like this, and we're glad they're not trying now.
The duo Tryst Arcane team up with guitarist Emanuel Portelli to bring a whole new dimension to Tryst Arcane's dark wave sound. There's a whole ambient facet that takes on a life of its own that makes this album a real surprise. The clean guitar brings an even deeper melancholy and even a surprising ambience, combining perfectly with the synthesizers that linger subtly in the background. That subtlety, in fact, ends up being the common thread of what we find here. Not being the usual ambient album, this is an excellent surprise that we can't ignore.
These Russians, whose name isn't exactly a winner, are an interesting band, but they make it clear what they're about. Doom metal, clearly. Although once you've enjoyed their music, you'll also realize that there's a post-metal edge here, especially in the instrumentation. Although this album isn't immediate, you don't have to give it too much to be convinced of its worth. Dramaturgy has a strong emotional impact that, in our opinion, peaks at the end with Misericord, which makes us want to repeat the dose with greater attention and get hooked on others like Chalice of Grief. Good album.
It's a nice surprise to see Lòdz present us with a passionate album and a work that represents a new era for the band, with a fresh lineup. We have an impressive melodic capacity as well as an atmosphere that cannot be resisted. This fusion, which isn't new at all, achieves high levels of effectiveness when the songs are really exciting. Hints of post-punk here and there, as well as post-rock and post-metal, give this album a very distinctive sound. The fact that we don't really know where to fit it in, which can always hinder a band when it comes to promoting or looking for an audience to promote to, turns out to be a good creative sign. But more than formulas or fusion of formulas, it's emotion that ends up being the guiding thread of this work.